meet you if we haven't met. My name is Jake Haber. I am the current pastor here at Aldea. But some of you may not realize that Aldea has a long history, and that throughout this beautiful journey, there have been, as Robbie said, so many wonderful people involved in creating this place. And so, when the precursor to Aldea, which was Community Church of the Foothills, when Kevin became the pastor of that community, I was entering kindergarten. So, and there was a nice girl who would tie my shoes every day in kindergarten. So that was kind of where I was at that point. But So I, looking back at this journey and thinking about the fact that we're in this, incredible space and time right now in our community, and the growing pains that we're facing and the beauty of that, I thought, there's few people who more intimately know this journey, this experience on a broad scale. And so I invited that person to be here today. So would you welcome Aldea's founder, Kevin Skinner?
Well, thank you, Jake. And thank you, everybody. It's great to be here. I almost said, Jake, geez, that's a little bit of a smart-assy thing to say. Then I thought, no, it's church. Anyway, you may have been in kindergarten when I was starting at what the precursor to Aldea, but I was just a child of 31 at the time, and just trying to figure out how to tie my own shoes as an adult. So here we are.
I guess I thought of it as self-deprecating, and I didn't realize how it could be taken the other way. Completely went over my head, so sorry about that. Well, I'm so happy to have you here and to have a conversation. And so I think I wanted to really just start by giving people a chance to know you. And I think one of the ways, because the culture that you've created, we love to go so deep quickly here. And so I would just love if you would share, thinking about this theme of growing pains, what has been for you just in your life, in your spiritual journey? What does that look like? What have the growing pains been? How has that kind of informed who you've become?
Yeah, sure. And let me just start by saying it's really great to be here today and to share this time with all of you and in a place that I love so much. And I just want to say, as we begin, Jake, how thrilled I am that you're here, that you're leading Aldea, and carrying it into its next growing pains and stages of life. And so I'm just ever so grateful for you, and it's a privilege to sit here with you today. So I appreciate you deeply.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I you. So.
Yeah. And so smart-assy comments aside. Yeah. And so, if I just even reflect on coming to the community that became Aldea and really reflecting on, I was 31. Came out of a couple really painful years in northern Minnesota, where the only good that came out of those 2 years was my never-ending fondness for the Minnesota Vikings, and some very, very dear friends that we still hang out with and go to Minnesota Vikings football games with every year. But there was so much that was happening in our life as a family, coming to what was CCF at the time. And I feel a little emotional. Thanks, Jake. Jeez. When we came to this community, and I'll just say this community because it's all one big evolution and transformation, right? We were hurting and we were broken. And this community became for us kind of like what Robbie was just talking about. It became for me something of a container and a crucible for my own growth and my own healing. And it created that space where I could continue to become who I am today. So there was a lot of healing that took place. There were so many great people who welcomed us, who welcomed our boys. And I came with, with an appropriate amount of like ambition and energy. I wanted to tear it up in the community, and do good things in this community. And so, the arc of the next 25, almost 30 years, created a space for all kinds of growth for me. Change in just to become more of a centered adult, to become a spiritual leader, to completely find my own way of thinking about faith and life, to be renewed over time, to leave really ultimately the faith I grew up in, more what did I just die? I'm not sure. Are you editing me in the back? Is that geez, Lori. It just became I think the two words of container and crucible really resonate for me. That it became a place where I could grow, where our family could grow, where my faith could grow, and where, in the end, what an amazing place to have, where other people were around me feeling the same journey of faith and the same transformation, and that we could look into each other's eyes and really appreciate, hey, we just don't actually believe like we used to believe. Let's be intrepid enough to create a new community, and let's call it Aldea, and let's make it the kind of place where our differences really can make us stronger and enrich us, and where we can explore faith, and where even along the way I could stand up in front of the community and go, I'm really kind of a Buddhist, progressive Christian. I'm mostly agnostic and sometimes atheist. And really want to have a place to explore what all that means in life, and we could do it. And don't get me wrong, we almost killed the church in the process. Like, we, at our biggest, I don't even know, we were, hundreds of people. And at our, when we really unveiled, like, this is what we're going to do. Here's Aldea. I think there were like 20 people left. And I think at the end of that, Sylvia and I sort of looked at each other and were like, yeah, we killed it. Like, what are we going to do? But here we are, so.
Wow. And that's something for me that I've found to be so valuable in the culture that you helped create in so many ways is, for myself, I look at this community and I think about my experience here, and I feel so free to grow, to be who I am. And I hope that everyone feels the same, because sometimes it's the person in leadership that is the one person that can't be who they truly are, or sometimes that's the culture, and that's but for everyone in this entire community, right? Whether you're staff, whether you're volunteer, whether you just attend, for everyone to feel that level of freedom to truly be the fluid, evolving, dynamic, spiritual human beings that we are, I think is just such a gift and something that I've cherished. And like in building that, obviously what we can hear is that there's such a history of probably many moments that felt like, how are we going to make it? How are we going to get through this, right? Moments you said where things felt like they were falling apart, and the growing pains in many ways are when we're on the precipice of some greater evolution. It can also feel like a death or feel like an ending. And so when you look back at just that beautiful long history that you've been a part of here, what were the feelings? How did you move through that? What were some of the things that now looking back you realize helped carry you and the community through some of those edge points where you're thinking, wow, what's next?
Yeah. Wow. Well, so it really did feel like we had killed this community along the way. And it's funny now, but it definitely wasn't funny then. And I remember the early in that journey, and there were, those of us at the core, some of the 20 who were left or whatever, we were really committed to making this happen and creating that kind of community where we could come together as explorers and faith builders and people who just were trying to live an authentic life outside of the overly constrained religious environments that many of us grew up in. And I think that that we did get a lot of, to your point, messages from, not a lot, significant messages from other leaders of other churches in the area who were back channeling appreciation for what we were doing, and back channeling a message that goes like this: I mean, we love what you're doing, keep doing it, but we will never do that because we will kill this church, and we're not willing to do that. And we're like, wow, it's too late for us, so we're going to keep going. And but I think the feelings ranged from the just the enthusiasm and excitement for kind of being at that precipice of something new, and feeling the support of, I could say, I felt the support of our leadership team at the time saying, let's do this. And Lori was, as I recall, we were at a Aravaipa Canyon retreat, and we were conspiring for what could be next. And Lori was there and on the team at the time, and I think we all looked at each other and were like, yeah, let's do this. And so it was excitement, enthusiasm, experimentation, and wow, we experimented a lot. Like, we were iterating and test driving all kinds of ideas, and some things really worked well, and other things just felt so flat. And like, wow, that was a swing and a miss, that try. But it was a meandering pathway, and I think that for communities like Aldea, that spirit of experimentation and a willingness to take risks, to fail and to learn and to iterate again, is really important. Like, this is, I think, that's what the transformational journey is for us as human beings. That's what a transformational journey is like for a community. And I think one of the things I'll say in terms of that process is, I think for me, probably for you, probably for most of us, when we think of the journey of growth and transformation, we would love for it to be like a straight line. Like, we pick a place we're going to go, and it's compelling, that vision of the future. We launch into it, and we just crush it. We get there, and it's full of elation. Are you with me? Do you want that? Like, but it just doesn't work that way. And that the transformational journey is one of, we do have a sort of a vision of what we're trying to accomplish in our own lives or in a community like Aldea, and we can only navigate as far as we can see. And we begin walking, and then along the way we see more. We're like, we need to course correct a bit. And we navigate by what we see, and we course correct a bit. It reminds me of, honestly, here's one of my favorite memories of Minnesota. When we first moved to Minnesota, which tends to be cold in northern Minnesota. And so they're also very outdoorsy in northern Minnesota. So one of the first things a few of the guys in the church did, they looked into my eyes and said, Kevin Skinner, you city boy from San Diego, we are going to teach you to be a deer hunter. And I was like, yes, because this says deer hunter. Laughed a little too hard at that. So I donned my blaze orange, and I put on my Iceman boots, and I had a gun that somebody gave me, and I trudged into the woods. And if you're not a hunter, please understand, no deer was ever at risk with me in the woods. That is absolutely true. I was mostly there for the snacks. And I remember one of the first things that happened that very first deer season was one of the guys I hunted with, who was just a classic North woodsman. Like, he could live in the middle of winter in the woods, and he would be fine. So he put a compass in my hand, and he said, Kevin, you're going to do what's called a deer drive. And I don't know that's not like a deer driving. That's, if you can imagine a dense patch of woods, and you're walking through the woods, trying to push the deer toward, in this case, Kenny Spencer, who is a good hunter, and they're running from me toward him and not understanding they should really be running at me and away from him. So you're driving the deer toward your companion, right? And so he's like, here's the deal. Here's where you are. And this patch of woods, you're going to walk whatever direction. You're walking north. Always look at your compass and never distrust your compass. because you're going to get in the middle of the woods and you're going to think, that's not true. I know north is that way. If you do that, you're going to die. And it has happened before. And I'm like, okay, are you sure you can trust me to do this? So I've got my gun slung over my shoulder. I've got the compass in my hand. And I give him time to get where he's going. And then I start like, okay, it's time to do the deer drive. And I would orient, start walking, but it's thick with trees. I'm walking, and pretty soon I stop, and I look at my compass. I'm like, holy crap! I'm going the wrong direction entirely, and got 2/3 of the way in and thought, I'm going to die here. I am never going to get out of these woods. I'm walking around in circles, and I just kept looking at my compass and reorienting. And eventually I found my way out and was thrilled to have lived. And it's kind of funny now, but I was terrified. I was literally terrified in these never-ending woods. And I think that's just transformation. That really feels like that's what transformation is. For us as people, we have a vision we're trying to, of the person we want to be, of the relationships we want to have, of the family we want to cultivate, of the life we want to build, the impact we want to have, and we start walking toward it. And along the way, if we don't once in a while reorient to true north, we get off track. And it gets scary, but we can trust that process of, as we continue walking, we will see more, and we will be able to navigate. And I think that's what the transition and the transformations of Aldea have always been like. We start, we correct, we keep going, we face fear, but if we're intrepid enough to keep walking, we do good things in the world.
I think, a lot of us were given narratives in our lives that, you kind of got to figure out who you want to be in the world, hopefully by the time you finish high school, and then stick with that for the rest of your life. And, that's going to lead you towards happiness, security, fulfillment. And some of us, maybe that worked, but for a lot of us, that didn't work. And we realized that, there's failure and there's disappointment. Maybe we get the thing that we're striving for. We realize it isn't everything. I know that, in even Aldea's journey, I'm sure there've been moments like that where you're building something and then you realize the ladder was up against the wrong wall kind of moment. And so realizing and just giving ourselves permission to have a dynamic life where we can, be one person and then something else calls to us. We move towards something else. Giving ourselves permission to be these expansive, types of people. That's, in many ways, how I define love is creating that space just for allowing, non-judgmentally, allowing the people in your life and even yourself to become, giving each other that space, that acceptance for whatever life is calling us towards. And so I think in many ways, Aldea has really embodied its own motto by allowing itself to continue to evolve into these different phases, and I see you embody that as well, your own personal journey, and getting up to that point where you made your own transition, and you gave yourself the very permission that you stood on stage and gave to so many other people for so many years. You gave yourself that permission. You took your own advice in a lot of ways, right? And there's so much courage and risk in that. And so, I just personally love to know, what was that like for you, and for people out there who are facing their own transitions and their own precipices that are scary, right? How do we deal with that fear and sort of take the leap anyway?
Yeah, I think if we keep on this transformational journey kind of idea that in the end, transformation really begins the moment when we are willing to see what the comfort zone is costing us. When we're willing to see what staying the same is costing us. And I think there's just a lot of truth in that. And so for me, I think when I reflect on the transition I made from being a leader at Aldea and somebody who's working in a business to leaving Aldea and only doing that. I think part of that really was coming to that space where I recognized that to do this, doing both, was costing me too much as a human being. And I was trying to do too many things. And so, as much as I loved this place, I needed to leave. And it wasn't an easy choice, and it certainly wasn't made in a short period of time. And so I just knew that once I started working locally and was an 8 to 5 kind of employee, as opposed to what I had been doing for 10 years of doing both work, where I would travel, but I would be home, work from home, travel. I would have a lot more flexibility to do Aldea work while traveling. I just didn't have that anymore. So, I was working 7 days a week. And I'm not a 7-day-a-week kind of guy. That's never been the vision of my true north. And so I had to be able to let my space here go. But I also, Sylvie and I talked about this for so long about I have no intention of leaving Aldea until Aldea feels like it's ready for a transition. And it's stable and strong enough, and it's sustainable, and it's got good leaders around it. And it was like that. And then ironically, literally the month after is when the pandemic started. The pandemic was really hard for Aldea. And you know that as well. And so I think that transitions and transformations, again, always begin with a kind of a willingness to have clarity. What would just staying the same cost me? And is it worth it? Does it really support the kind of life I want to live and the kind of impact I want to make in the world? And I think it's true for a community that it's easy for spiritual communities to find a groove, to find a rhythm, let's just talk about the transition to 2 services, which can theoretically be, that's just a small thing. And that's not a small thing. That's a big thing. And it shakes us up because now we're not the same anymore. And yet, if we don't do that, what's it going to cost us? It costs us in closing this place. It costs us keeping others from finding the same love and community and transformative environment that we've all found in this place. And so to make room for others is hard. And it brings a new phase of life together. But wow, that's what keeps life going. And so I think that one of the writers that I love so much, his name is Robert Quinn. And he is you should look him up.
Words fail.
Go to YouTube and type in Dr. Robert Quinn, Center for Positive Organizations. This is a guy who's now in his 80s. He spent his entire life researching what do brilliant organizations do that separate them from others? And what do the leaders of those organizations do that separates them from other leaders? And it's founded this whole domain called positive organizational scholarship. It's much more fun than it sounds. And positive leadership. And Quinn is just this transformational presence of a person. I've had the opportunity to have dinner with him and to be in spaces where he's teaching his brilliance. And he has a book called Deep Change. And in it, he talks about the transformational journey. And there are a couple of things that he says in that book that I think are so profound for a community like Aldea, and they've certainly been profound for me as a person who seeks transformation. He says that the 2 options that we have, the 2 options Aldea has, if Quinn were sitting here today, just picture this brilliant 6'4" elderly statesman who, when he looks into you, he sees your soul. That's Quinn. And he would say, Jake, you have two choices at Aldea. Slow death or deep change. And he would look at each one of us individually and say, you have two choices in your life. Slow death or deep change. And deep change always feels like this. It is walking naked into uncertainty. And if you're not willing to do it, and parenthetically, most people aren't, and most communities aren't, but if you're willing to do it, you will experience transformation. You will experience deep change. And you will be on the other side of all of that uncertainty and that feeling of nakedness and everything that represents, and you won't regret it. And that speaks to me.
Yeah. Wow.
Bob Quinn. That's Bob Quinn.
Where is that finding you today? Where are you facing the edge of your comfort zone and realizing perhaps that it's costing you, right? Would you be willing to just look that in the face today, right? We all have this, and it doesn't necessarily need to be career, right? It can be all areas of our lives. But again, I agree with that there are those two choices, right? And so how do those two options meet you, right? What does walking naked into the unknown look like for you in this time? And I see you on the other side of your deep change, and so thrilled for you and inspired by how you walked into that, and then how you were met with that next evolution of your own reach in the world. And in many ways, and we've talked about this, like you are continuing to be you and get to offer your gift to the world, just in a different context, in a different space. And you have what I think of is one of the coolest job titles currently. I'm going to say it, and you can correct me if it's wrong. But Kevin is a director of culture and organizational change at Tucson Electric Power. And don't we need in our corporate organizational environments an understanding of how we can move through change, right? And sometimes, we look at that environment, and for so many years we didn't, in those spaces in the corporate world, there wasn't a conversation as much about what it's like to, in many ways, the spiritual aspect of these types of organizations. And so I'm curious though, because in many ways it's an extension of the work that you've always been doing, right? You've been on this path and remained true to yourself. Perhaps what are some of the things that you've brought along the way? You've been a spiritual community leader, and now you're continuing to build and lead community in this different space. What are the things that are sort of been continuous for you that you pulled along with you from Aldea, from your time, leading spiritual community, and into what you're doing now?
Yeah. I guess I would say I think the work I do, honestly, it's a different container. It's the same calling for me, and to be able to work. When I first started with the organization, I was in learning and development, and primarily focused on leadership development and the development of people. And I have this. I've said this many times at work that I think leadership is a sacred calling. I use that language, and that it requires something different of us if we're going to be leaders. And to be a leader doesn't it's not. I'm a great accountant. I'm going to be a great leader. I'm a great engineer. I'm going to be a great leader. Those things have nothing to do with each other. And I think that's a startling thing for many people when they're leaders. But to recognize leadership is a sacred calling. We are here to create environments where people can thrive. And as people thrive, businesses thrive. The community thrives. We are, as an organization, we are committed to creating this place that, to quote a portion of our vision, to create a place that positively impacts the lives of our employees, our customers, and our communities. And we really do have an aspiration to do that for generations to come. And I think that it really means then creating spaces for leaders to be at their best and for an organization to be more human. And is that a straight line? Well, no, that's also a lot of reorienting to compass points. And it may be a cool title, but honestly, there are any number of people who at work look at me and go, oh, you probably just couldn't get a real job, right? And I appreciate all that. But I think I'm so grateful for our company and our leaders' commitment to creating a culture that's positive, a culture that's values-driven, a culture that really lives its values. And there are always exceptions, right? There's no perfect organization, just like there's no perfect spiritual community. But we really are committed to this journey and have been doing, I think, really exciting things to grow our leaders as humans and to grow our leaders as leaders and to grow the people of our organization and to create a place that people can love working in, recognizing that the work we do is actually present this very moment in this very place because the lights are on and the mic is working. And that we recognize that the business we're in is, I mean, I'll use my language, it's a sacred trust in this community. And how can we be better to create a better impact? And so I think, different container, same calling. And so I don't feel like my work is all that different. At times I use maybe different language, but I use most of the same language, including probably swearing too often.
And so, wow, I just love that you were able to move through that transition and understand kind of and see yourself through that and just kind of, for all of us, I think realizing that even though so much changes and yet so much stays the same for us. And if we can remain true to ourselves when we go outside of our comfort zone, it's a very beautiful, peaceful flute music ringtone. There, it's gone. Okay. When we have the courage, I think sometimes we fear that we're going to lose everything about ourselves when we walk into the unknown, when we face deep change. But in many ways, it actually continues to unravel into the truth of who we are, right? That next layer, just as the caterpillar walks into the cocoon, becomes the butterfly. And so, I know with the work that you do, you are taking people through these really powerful processes, changing the way that maybe things are looked at, frameworks, ways of just enhancing, expanding perspective, just as we love to do here. And so I'm curious, perhaps even stuff that's really on your mind right now, of just concepts, things that you're guiding your team and your people through, maybe that apply to what we're going through, the growing pains. I'm sure that there are more than enough growing pains in an organization like TEP, which, is serving a city that is facing growing pains constantly, right? And so it never stops. And so, if we were, in your programs and we were walking through some stuff with you now, like how would you look at what we're experiencing as a community, the growth that we're experiencing, the change, and each of us as individuals coming to this community, trying to find our place in that change? How might you speak to us?
Well, I think there are a few things we're really centering the work in this transformational journey for our leaders and for our organization. And I think there are things that Jake, you're doing here at Aldea as well. For example, we do a lot of work in, I think, you and I have had conversations about spiral dynamics. I know you've had conversations with the community about that journey of transformation as we grow into, more mature stages of development as human beings. And we, so I would say we're doing a ton of that work at the company. And putting our leaders through programs that are centered on how do we as leaders find that leading edge of our own human growth and recognize that leading edge of human growth, that stage we've reached and then we're at, that transformational process into deeper stages of human development are really critical to us as humans, but critical to our leadership. And so we're trying to help our leaders articulate for themselves, sort of what's your, we call it a breakthrough declaration or a breakthrough statement that represents the next thing. If you were to live that breakthrough, you would be more of who you are, more of that unfolding of your own self-energy at its best, and you would be more able to lead. And that in the end, that vertical development or spiral dynamic growth always hits the sort of the ceiling, creates the ceiling of how well we'll function in our lives. Are you with me on that? Like our development creates the ceiling. Like we could see things we want to do or be, but until we're willing to do that deep work of growth, we just won't be able to. One of my favorite ways of saying this at our work, an example would be like, we have lots of great learning opportunities for people, and we teach them things like we put them through courses like Crucial Conversations. I don't know if you've read that book, but how do you sit down with someone and have this really crucial conversation where you don't agree and emotions are high and there's like high stakes in this, and we can teach people the skills of doing it. It's a really great book. It's a really great program. Like, if you put me through that, and I learn the practices, and I've got the diagrams, and it makes sense intellectually. Are you with me so far? Yeah, then the moment Jake and I sit down and we're having like that really legitimate like disagreement conversation, my vertical development creates the ceiling for how well I'll be able actually to practice what I theoretically learned in a class. And if I'm not doing that growth work, I will sit down and immediately forget everything that I know, and not do anything that was the right thing to do that could have helped us find that center to center space. And that's just how it is in life. And so that's true for us as people as we navigate. How do we do the deep work to see what we are just more comfortable not seeing? To face the parts of our lives that are wounded? To recognize that no matter how much we don't want it to be the case, or we can look like it's not the case, especially on a Sunday morning, that every single one of us carries around a wounded little us inside. And we're doing everything we can to protect that wounded little one. And as long as we keep protecting it, it can't grow, and it can't heal, and it can't transform. So how do we do that deep work? Of reflection, of therapy, of more reflection, of more facing things we don't want to face, and feeling feelings we don't want to feel, and there's so many of them. And if we're not willing to do that work, we just won't grow. And that's true for every one of us in this room. And it's true for the whole of the organization. If the community of Aldea doesn't continue to spiral up to deeper stages of development as a community, it gets stuck, and its energy gets stuck, and its impact in the world gets stuck. And so we have to collectively do hard work to evolve as a community. And two things I'll say about that and stop is I don't want to romanticize it, because that is hard effing work. And I said the real word in my head. And it is, I had a therapy appointment last week, and I was putting my shoes back on, and I looked up at my therapist, and I said, this is so hard. And all I ever do is cry when I'm in this office. And she was like, sorry? You're welcome? And I told her I was just so grateful for such a space. We need those spaces in our lives. And my challenge to all of us, is my challenge to me. What am I going to do to keep growing? Because if I don't, there's a whole me that's not coming to life. If you're not doing that work, there's a whole you that's just not coming to life. And if we collectively don't do that, there's a whole us that's not coming to life. So it's hard. I don't want to romanticize it. nor do I want to suggest I'm done. Like, well, geez, I was just in a therapy appointment last week. It just doesn't stop. And one of the things I think our ego does really, really, really well is whisper in our ears, "Oh, you've already done that work. I think it's okay for you to move on. This is what he's saying now is for other people. You've done such great work." Did anybody hear that as I was saying those things? One of the expressions we have is a little colorful, but it goes like this. That little voice, it's the insidious little bastard of the ego. Like, don't listen to it. Just do the work.
Well, does your therapist let you take your shoes off? That was the interest. I'm going to start. Is that help?
No shoes allowed.
Okay.
If you're not barefoot, there's no therapy.
I'm going to try that and see if it sort of, opens up my heart a little bit.
Yeah, you might want to just tell people in advance because some people have smelly feet.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
So as Kevin described, so many beautiful ideas, right? And really kind of landing on this idea of breakthrough and having a space in our lives, spaces, people where we are safe to move to that growing edge, move towards breakthrough, move towards transformation, move towards deep change. How many of you have felt like this place has been a space like that for you? I just want to honor you and say that we owe that to you. We really do. And we do. And to Sylvia and to the many leaders and leadership team members who are still here, who have been here for 25 years and 15 years and 10 years and 5 years. It's a culture that has been built and labored over, bled for, cried over for decades now. And so I am so grateful that I get to participate in that journey, just to be the next part of wherever this life cycle of this community is going. It's such an honor. And I want to honor you. And I just, want to share the fact that the level of support that Kevin has given me personally and really, us all in this next phase of this community, it's rare. It's not something that I see very often, to have the level of just love and support and kindness and gentleness, and the way that you do it is so uniquely you. And so I love it. But I just deep gratitude, because we wouldn't be here doing what we're doing for so many reasons without everything that you've given. And so I'm just, so thrilled to be able to bring you here to this kind of new version of us, right? There's so many people here who, how many of you have been coming within the last year, right? Wow, right? 2 years, last 2 years. Wow. So in many ways, you're getting to meet Kevin for the first time today. And so if you feel compelled, would you just take a moment, share your gratitude for everything, right? Everything that